Good morning, world. It's your man Jay Petty checking in. The Chancellor's here, bringing you guys a part 2 of the African and African American relations and what we can do to unite. Today I've joined with me a special guest by the name of John. He's a migrant from Cameroon who has come here, been here in the States for quite some time. We're basically going to talk about African Americans and Africans and what we need to do to unite. I welcome John. How you doing this morning?
Well, Jay, I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on your show.
Great. So we've discussed a lot about the relations and what we need to do to have a productive and positive impact on all African people all around the world, especially here in the U.S. There's a lot of there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of going back and forth of people blaming this person, people blaming that person. Both sides saying, "Oh, they don't like us, we don't like them." In your opinion, do you see a divide between African people and African Americans? Do you see that divide, or am I misguided in saying that?
Well, thank you very much for that question. There has always been this question of a divide and divide. The number one thing that I would like to say is that there is a divide in continents. That is number one thing. I strongly feel that African Americans and Africans are still as united as they've ever been. There is a perception issue, but we can also, not be so far from reality that there is certain type of myth and cultural differences that makes people, do not understand each other. I do not understand a lot of what the African Americans are, and they do not understand what I am from Africa. So we are still struggling to understand each other, and I think that is a gap that can be closed if we commit ourselves to understanding each other. So I think that is my response to the question of divide as of this moment. When you want to talk about, perhaps when I understand divide is how do we Africans, what is the perception of we African immigrants here in the United States to the African Americans here in the United States? I think that would probably be a better question. My take on this is I'll share my own personal experience.
Okay.
I came to the United States. Most of what I know about African Americans is that they are not serious people. They do not like to go to school. They were lazy and all of those things. But the question I would like to ask is, are there Africans who are lazy? Are there Africans who hate school? Are there Africans who are unserious? And the answer to that is yes. So it's on both sides. So it's just a function of getting on the same page and understanding each other, understanding culture, understanding the whole aspects of, especially I'll bring this, I'm sorry if I say this, but the whole thing of slavery and the impact of slavery on the African Americans. I am very, very privileged. I came from Africa. I came with education. I came from a stabilized home. I came with I have a very supportive community. I have worked in a lot of African American communities, especially the south side of Chicago. It is not the same culture. It's not the same family dynamic. It is not the same system. So we are privileged, and I take myself from that team that look at African Americans as lazy or as people who are not just serious. That is not true. It is not true because they are going through circumstances that even if we are told as Africans, immigrants here in the United States, we would never understand. And I give credit to African Americans especially because they paved the way for me to come to the United States and be able to have a job.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
They sacrificed their lives. They were burned, beaten by dogs, and shot and killed on streets, and hung and burnt alive. A whole civil rights, whole movement. These are the sacrifices that African Americans made for a black man to have the opportunity to live in America. I am a beneficiary of the sacrifice of African Americans. So for me to sit and say they are lazy people, they are not. I dismiss that part. I want to say that they are a group of people who are emancipating themselves gradually from the whole thing of slavery, from the whole trauma of slavery. And we cannot deny the fact that even today, slavery still exists. It does exist. It is institutional.
Yes.
It is still limiting African Americans. It is still limiting a black person. And this is a conversation that we should be having. Like, how can we work together with our brothers and sisters, the African Americans in here, to understand each other so that we can face this devil of institutional slavery, institutional marginalization, and all of these things. So we are looking at what we can do to get together. The rest of it is myth. So that will be my take on that, Mr. Chase.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I agree with you on most of those things. It is true. A lot of this stuff is myth. A lot of this stuff is, we project a lot of the negative stuff about when it comes to Africans or African Americans from both sides. We're projecting all this wrongdoing and negativity. We don't look at the positivity and the great things that both cultures have to offer. You brought up something that was very important. The African American blacks did contribute and did pave the way. I mean, they sacrificed a lot for a lot of these people coming from different continents, different areas, whether it's Africa or any other type of immigrants. They kind of, laid down and took the bullet for that. So with all the negative stereotypes out there, and we definitely need to get together and see how we can mend this and build a stronger unity, and not only just talk the talk, but actually start doing some things and put some action behind our words. So this is a question I want to leave our audience with and ask you as well, because I think it's very important. Do you think the media plays a role in the interactions of African Americans and Africans? What I mean by that is television, movies, news, internet. Do you think that media plays a role?
I want to strongly believe that media has been one of the most divisive tool that has been used to kind of separate or continue to divide African immigrants and African Americans. The perception of Africans to African Americans is very, very poor. And the perception of African Americans towards Africa as a continent and African countries is very, very poor. And I will explain this because what the media portray of Africa is not true. Africa is a very, very rich continent. Africa is very, very wealthy. This is a continent with the most wealth and natural resources that can feed this world in the next generation. But Africa continues to be behind. And the media has played a lot of role in keeping African Americans, who are very smart people, who are very industrious, who understand economy, who understand politics, from Africa. Why is it that African American intellectuals pay little attention to what is happening in Africa? Why is it that our African American stars here in the US have little interest in talking about Africa, in singing about Africa, in going to Africa, in projecting what Africa really is? Why is it that African Americans only think of Africa to limit Africa for wildlife? I want to go see the lions. I want to go see why don't you say you want to go see the beach in Senegal? Why don't you say you want to go see the desert and the monuments in Egypt? Why don't you want to go see the slave castle in Ghana where you get spiritually attached? Why don't you want to go to Ivory Coast where you have all the beautiful beaches and everything? Why don't you want to go to Senegal? Why don't you want to go to... So these are the things. the media would only show you or only portray Africa as a land where there is hunger, a land where there is drought,
Yes.
as people who live in the streets, as people who have no shoes to put on. Why don't you take time? Go on Google one African country and get what it says. Thank God for social media, that we can go back to the same social media that divides us to see the reality of what we are being told. We cannot continue to let the West tell our story. We
Yes.
have to be able to tell our stories
Come on.
ourselves.
Yes.
So this is my take on it. Go Google Cameroon, Google Senegal, Google any African country, see what it says. My name is John. I'm here with Jay. Get back here, subscribe to this channel, support us, like it, and let us have a conversation. There are a lot of questions that we can answer. There are a lot of things that we can do together, and we depend on you, and we want you to come on board. Let us do this together.
Man, thank you for coming out and doing this with me. We've been talking a while about it. I think it was very passionate. We got our points across. Now we have to take some action. There was a lot of information that we can grasp from it. A lot of things to think about, people. And that's what my content is all about, cultivating your thoughts, man. Let's have a conversation about these things. Let's put some action. You don't have to necessarily agree with everything, but let's at least have a dialogue and extend that olive branch out there for people to, walk on by and walk on through. This is Jay Petty, the Chancellor's here with John. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Peace.
Thank you so much.